The Legend of Zelda franchise has been hiding secrets in plain sight for nearly 4 decades. Across dozens of games, 3 separate timelines, and thousands of years of in-universe history, there are mysteries that Nintendo has never fully explained. Today, I'm breaking down every single one of them, starting with a forest that shouldn't be possible. The Lost Woods. There's a forest that shows up in over 12 mainline Zelda games, and nobody has ever fully explained what it actually is. The Lost Woods isn't just a recurring location, it's a recurring problem, because forests don't have rules, mazes do. Think about it. In every appearance, the Lost Woods operates on a specific, learnable system. Walk the wrong direction, you loop back to the start. Follow the right path, you push deeper in. The trees don't just block you, they redirect you, like something is actively deciding where you're allowed to go. But here's where it gets weird. The same forest, with the same behavior, exists across wildly different eras and completely separate timelines. A natural forest doesn't survive the collapse of civilizations and the splitting of reality itself, while keeping its rules perfectly intact. Twilight Princess's version alone contains over 40 distinct sections and dead ends. That's not organic growth, that's architectural complexity, the kind you'd find in something built on purpose. So is the Lost Woods a pocket dimension outside Hyrule entirely, or a deliberately maintained enchantment constructed by a force we've never identified? Nobody has a definitive answer, but at least the Lost Woods just traps you in a loop. The next mystery involves an artifact that wants to destroy everything: the origin of Majora's Mask. Here's everything the game tells you about where Majora's Mask came from. An ancient tribe used it in hexing rituals. That's it. No tribe name, no civilization, no purpose beyond hexing rituals, which tells you absolutely nothing. Nintendo has never clarified a single detail beyond that, and honestly, the origin isn't even what makes this mystery terrifying. What makes it terrifying is what the mask does once it exists. See, when Skull Kid puts on Majora's Mask, you'd expect it to amplify his emotions. He's a lonely, angry kid, so the mask should make him lonelier and angrier, right? But that's not what happens. The mask doesn't amplify Skull Kid's desires. It replaces them entirely. Skull Kid wanted to prank people and get attention. The mask wanted to rip the moon out of the sky and end all of reality. Those aren't the same goals. That's not a tool responding to its user. That's a will hijacking a host. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. In Twilight Princess, Malice takes a physical form that mirrors Majora's design almost exactly. That visual connection raises a massive question. Is the mask an ancient Malice artifact? A prison built to contain something worse? Or does it predate both Hyrule and Termina entirely? Some official artwork places the mask's apparent age before recorded Hyrulean history, before the Golden Goddesses shaped the world. Whatever created Majora's Mask may have existed before the timeline even started, which means we're not looking at a mystery about who made it. We're looking at something that might have always been there. And if the mask is that old, then the guy who was carrying it around in a backpack has some serious explaining to do. The identity of the Happy Mask salesman. This guy has no name. Not in any game, not in any guide, not in any supplementary material Nintendo has ever published. He's just the Happy Mask salesman. And honestly, that should have been our first red flag. He shows up in Ocarina of Time running a mask shop in Hyrule. Fine. Weird dude, big smile, harmless enough. But then he shows up again in Majora's Mask and Termina, a completely different world, looking exactly the same, acting exactly the same, with zero explanation for how he got there. Nobody in the game questions this. Nobody asks him where he came from. He's just there, smiling, like he's always been there. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. He tells you his masks reveal your true face. That's either the world's creepiest sales pitch or a genuine threat, and the game never clarifies which one it is. But the moment that actually changes everything about this character is what happens when you fail him. When Majora's Mask isn't recovered, the Happy Mask salesman doesn't panic. He doesn't cry. He gets angry, visibly, physically aggressive. His face contorts, he shakes Link, and that permanent smile vanishes like it was never real in the first place, which raises a question nobody has been able to answer. Was he ever the mask's victim, or was he always its keeper? The fan theories are endless. He's a Zonai. He's demise in disguise. He exists outside of time entirely. And the maddening part is that Nintendo has never confirmed or denied a single one of them. He remains, after decades, a complete enigma wrapped in a grin. But if a nameless shopkeeper with timeline-breaking powers unsettles you, wait until you meet the dead hero who teaches you sword techniques from beyond the grave. The hero's shade. This one hurts. Nintendo confirmed it outright. The skeletal ghost that haunts Link throughout Twilight Princess, the one who appears as a decayed, golden-eyed warrior and teaches you sword techniques nobody else in Hyrule remembers, is the hero of time. That's the Link from Ocarina of Time, the one who pulled the Master Sword, defeated Ganondorf, saved 2 entire worlds if you count Termina, the greatest hero the franchise had ever produced, and he's a tormented, rotting ghost who can't find peace. Let that actually land for a second. Every hidden skill he teaches you, all 7 of them, These are techniques that no living swordsman in Twilight Princess knows. They died with him, and every single interaction you have with the hero's shade is soaked in regret. He doesn't talk like a proud warrior passing down his legacy. He talks like a man who failed at something he can't name. But here's where it gets genuinely dark. The game's dialogue implies he's trapped in a liminal state, unable to move on. He saved Hyrule, he survived the horrors of Termina and Majora's Mask. He lived through things that would break anyone, and none of it was enough to let him rest. The timeline split makes this even worse. When Link is sent back in time at the end of Ocarina, the timeline fractures. The hero of time technically has two diverging fates across two separate timelines, and neither one apparently ends with him at peace. Whether you follow the child era path or the adult era path, the result is the same. The greatest hero in Zelda history becomes a ghost defined by sorrow. There's a cosmic cruelty to that. You can save the world, defeat the ultimate evil, endure unimaginable trauma, and the universe still doesn't let you go. The hero's shade isn't a mystery about what happened. It's a tragedy about what heroism actually costs. But if the hero of time's fate feels unfair, wait until you hear what happened to an entire civilization that got erased from existence, the fate of the Twily. The hero's shade lost himself, but the Twily lost everything. Think about what we actually know about this civilization. They had their own realm, their own rulers, their own political structure, their own soldiers and infrastructure. Thousands of sapient beings living in a parallel dimension, sealed away by the golden goddesses as punishment for some ancient sin that nobody ever bothers to name. And in Twilight Princess, they're a massive part of the story. Zant rallies an entire army of Twily forces, invades Hyrule, and nearly conquers it. You fight Twily soldiers, you navigate Twily architecture, you interact with Twily survivors, including Midna, who becomes one of the most beloved characters in the entire franchise. But here's where it gets unsettling. The game ends. Zant is defeated. Midna shatters the mirror of Twilight, the only known bridge between her world and Hyrule. And then the Twily just vanish from the series entirely, not referenced in the next game, not mentioned in supplementary lore, not acknowledged in any timeline material as still existing. An entire civilization, thousands strong, with confirmed culture and confirmed survivors, gets quietly erased from Zelda history. No restoration arc, no diplomatic follow-up, no confirmation they're even still alive. The fan theories trying to explain this range from tragic to terrifying. Some believe the Twilight Realm collapsed after the mirror was destroyed, taking every surviving Twily with it. Others think the goddesses performed a second, quieter erasure, wiping them from history the same way they banished them from Hyrule in the first place. And then there's the theory that connects their disappearance to the Zonai, another advanced civilization that vanishes from the timeline around the same era with zero explanation. Two entire peoples, gone back to back, and nobody in universe seems to notice or care. That's not a loose thread, that's a pattern. But if vanishing civilizations are disturbing, the place they were all fighting over is somehow even stranger. The Sacred Realm, here's the thing about the Sacred Realm. It shows up in over 11 games across the franchise, and nobody can agree on where it actually is, because it doesn't have a location, not really. Hyrule Historia officially describes the Sacred Realm as existing outside of normal space and time. That's not a poetic flourish, that's the actual canonical description of the dimension that holds the Triforce and serves as the seat of the Golden Goddess's power. It doesn't sit north of Hyrule, or beneath the ocean, or behind a secret wall. As it exists somewhere that physical geography can't describe. But here's where it gets interesting. The way you access it keeps changing. In Ocarina of Time, you enter through the Temple of Time. In other eras, entirely different structures, entirely different rituals. Players have pointed to this as a continuity error for years, but it's not. If anything, the inconsistency is the answer. The Sacred Realm isn't anchored to any fixed point in the physical world. It's a threshold that can open anywhere, which means the door moves even if the room behind it doesn't. And that room, it's alive. In A Link to the Past, the Sacred Realm transforms into the Dark World the moment evil enters it, not gradually, not through some corruption process that takes centuries. The realm itself reshapes to reflect whatever is inside it. A divine space that mirrors the soul of its occupant isn't just a location on a map. It's a living, reactive dimension that becomes what you bring into it. Now here's the part that keeps the theorists up at night. The Twilight Realm shares eerily similar properties. A shadow dimension, sealed away, warped by the nature of its inhabitants. Nobody at Nintendo has ever confirmed or denied whether the Twilight Realm is just another phase of the Sacred Realm, seen through a different lens. And that possibility, that every dark world, every shadow dimension, every void in the entire franchise might be one single place, viewed from different angles, sits at the center of the most ambitious, unified theory discussions the Zelda community has ever produced. But if a living dimension is hard to pin down, wait until you hear about the weapon that was forged to protect it. The origin of the Master Sword. The Master Sword wasn't forged. It was willed into existence by a goddess who knew her war would never end. Skyward Sword lays this out explicitly. The goddess Hylia created the blade alongside Phi, a divine spirit who became the sword's living core. This wasn't a blacksmith hammering steel in some sacred forge. It was a deity engineering a weapon approximately 10,000 years before the events of Ocarina of Time, designed not to win a single battle, but to seal evil permanently. And that word, permanently, is where things get uncomfortable. Here's the thing. Hylia built the Master Sword, specifically to counter Demise, the source of all evil in the Zelda timeline. But the sword's design suggests she already knew Demise's destruction wouldn't stick. His curse guarantees that hatred reincarnates forever. So Hylia didn't build a sword to end a war. She built an eternal weapon to match an eternal enemy. The blade was never meant to collect dust on a pedestal. It was meant to be picked up again and again and again across thousands of years by heroes who don't even know why they're drawn to it. But here's where it gets haunting. Fi doesn't leave the sword after Skyward Sword. She goes dormant inside it. Her final words to Link are a goodbye and then silence. Every Link who picks up the Master Sword after that moment is carrying a sealed consciousness inside their weapon, a being that may still be aware, still listening, still waiting for a threat serious enough to justify waking up. Think about that alongside the hero's shade. One hero becomes a ghost because he can't let go. Meanwhile, Hogsun, the spirit inside his sword, might have been watching the whole time, unable to speak, unable to help. Then Breath of the Wild complicates everything further by letting the Master Sword break. An indestructible blade suddenly has a health bar and a cooldown timer. The leading theory is that the sword's power scales with its wielder, that it only reaches full strength against true evil. But the game never confirms this. It just lets the contradiction sit there, unexplained, while players watch their legendary blade shatter against a lintel. A goddess built a prison disguised as a weapon, sealed a conscious being inside it forever, and nobody in Hyrule has ever questioned it. But the technology that might explain how any of this works has its own mystery, and it's buried under 10,000 years of Sheikah secrets. The secret of the Sheikah technology. The Sheikah built autonomous combat robots 10,000 years before Breath of the Wild. Laser targeting guardians capable of independent movement, independent decision-making, and enough firepower to level a small town. That puts their engineering roughly contemporary with the end of Skyward Sword, which means somebody was mass-producing advanced robotics, while Link and Zelda were still figuring out how to seal Demise. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Look at any piece of Sheikah technology closely. The Sheikah slate, the guardians, the shrines, the divine beasts. Every single one of them runs on a power source that has never been identified or explained. No fuel, no visible energy core, no magical conduit. They just work. Now look at the design language. That glowing red eye motif, carved into every piece of Sheikah architecture, is visually identical to Malice aesthetics. The same swirling red energy, the same eye imagery, the same pulsing glow. That raises a question nobody at Nintendo has ever answered. Is it possible that the Sheikah's power source and Ganon's corruption force are the same thing, just viewed from opposite sides? Think about what that means. Hyrule's most devoted protectors, the civilization that built every tool designed to stop Calamity Ganon, may have been running on the exact same energy he weaponizes. That's not a coincidence you can brush off, but the real paradox cuts even deeper. Sheikah technology appears to be older than the Hyrule it was supposedly built to defend, possibly older than Skyward Sword's era entirely. If that's true, the Sheikah aren't a subspecies of Hylian. There's something that was already here when Hylians arrived. Something older, something with knowledge that predates the goddess herself. And Calamity Ganon wiped out most of their infrastructure, roughly a century before Link wakes up, which means whatever the Sheikah were truly capable of at their peak, we've only ever seen the leftovers. What survived is already terrifying. What was destroyed might have been world-ending. But if ancient technology raises questions, wait until you hear what a single musical instrument did to the fabric of reality itself, the mystery of the Ocarina of Time. Here's the thing about the Ocarina of Time. Everyone treats it like a cool gameplay mechanic. You play a song, time shifts, doors open, and you move on with your adventure. But if you stop and actually think about what this instrument does, it becomes one of the most terrifying artifacts in the entire franchise. The Ocarina of Time doesn't just let Link travel between his childhood and adulthood, it fractures reality itself. Its use in the Ocarina of Time is the direct cause of the timeline splitting into three separate branches: the child timeline, the adult timeline, and the downfall timeline, where Link straight up loses. Three entirely different versions of Hyrulean history, branching from a single melody played on a hand-carved instrument. Not a divine decree, not a cosmic event, a flute. But here's where it gets complicated. Nobody in the entire Zelda canon explains how this works. Musical melodies reverse the flow of days, open sacred portals, reshape the fabric of reality, and not a single character, not a single piece of in-game text, not a single supplementary book ever clarifies the mechanism. Music just does this. That's all you get. And the origin of the Ocarina itself, equally blank. It's never confirmed as divine craftsmanship, but the blue coloring and thematic associations with Nairu, the goddess of wisdom, whose domain explicitly includes time, law, and order, have fueled decades of fan speculation that this artifact contains or channels a fragment of her power. It would explain a lot, but it's never confirmed. The real question nobody asks enough is whether the timeline split was even supposed to happen, because if it wasn't, if the fracture was an unintended consequence of a child playing a song he barely understood, then three entire realities, including one where the hero falls and darkness wins, weren't part of any divine plan. They were an accident. The goddesses didn't architect three timelines. A kid with an instrument did. That's the kind of power that should terrify everyone in Hyrule. But at least, the Ocarina's mystery is limited to one artifact. The Zonai left behind an entire civilization's worth of unanswered questions. The secret of the Zonai. The Zonai are not Hylian. They're not Sheikah. They're not any race that currently exists in Hyrule. They have upright horns growing from their skulls, non-human physiology, and they built their entire civilization from a white stone that appears nowhere else on the continent. Every other race in Hyrule shares materials, trades resources, overlaps architecturally. The Zonai didn't share anything. They built alone with materials nobody else had access to, using rules nobody else understood, and then they vanished. Here's where it gets interesting. The timeline for their disappearance is approximately 10,000 years before Breath of the Wild. That number should sound familiar by now, because it's the same gap that keeps showing up every single time something foundational was either built or destroyed in Hyrule. The Sheikah technology, the sealing of ancient evils, the forging of divine weapons. 10,000 years. Every time. The Zonai fit perfectly into that window, which means whatever happened to them happened during the same era when everything else in Hyrule's deep history was being written. But their technology is what really breaks things open. Sky Islands suspended indefinitely by an unknown force, and she's structures that have survived 10,000 years of wind, rain, and atmospheric exposure without visible deterioration. Apparent time manipulation devices built into their architecture. Whatever power source the Zonai were working with, it doesn't follow the same physical rules as anything else in Hyrule. Not Sheikah tech, not divine magic. Something else entirely. And then there's Ganondorf. In Tears of the Kingdom, the Demon King of Hyrule appears partially Zonai transformed. That's not a small detail. That either means Ganondorf carries Zonai heritage in his bloodline, or he absorbed Zonai power directly. Both answers are terrifying because both mean the greatest villain in Hyrule's history shares a bloodline or energy source with the civilization that was supposedly protecting it. No surviving Zonai are ever encountered. Their fate is officially unexplained. But the Zelda franchise has a very clear pattern. Civilizations that get too close to divine power don't simply die. They become something unrecognizable, or they go somewhere the games haven't shown us yet. The Zonai didn't leave ruins because they were destroyed. They left ruins because they became something else. And whatever that something else is, it might explain the force that's been corrupting Hyrule from the inside out. The true nature of malice. You've seen it everywhere in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. That red and black substance crawling across walls, corrupting guardians, infecting weapons, turning living creatures into something worse. The game calls it ancient evil. But here's the thing, that label raises more questions than it answers. All that because malice doesn't behave like a side effect. It behaves like something alive. During the 100-year calamity, Ganon was sealed beneath Hyrule Castle, locked away, contained. But malice kept spreading. It didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It corrupted the guardians, poisoned the divine beasts, and swallowed entire regions of Hyrule while its supposed master was imprisoned. That's not a weapon following orders. That's an independent force with its own agenda. And nobody wants to talk about the visual connection to Majora's Mask. Dark organic material, glowing red accents, that same pulsing, almost biological aesthetic. Official artwork from both eras shares a specific look that Nintendo has never once acknowledged or explained. If those two things are connected, then the sentient evil artifact that nearly destroyed Termina in 2000 and the corruption force threatening Hyrule decades later aren't separate threats. They're the same entity wearing different faces across different eras. But here's where the ground falls out from under you. The most disruptive theory in the entire Zelda community flips the franchise on its head. Malice doesn't come from Ganondorf. Ganondorf comes from Malice. He isn't the source of the corruption. He's one of its vessels, a recurring human host that the ancient evil selects across timelines, rides until spent, then discards and replaces with the next incarnation. Under this reading, Ganon was never the final boss. He was a puppet. Malice was pulling the strings the entire time, and this connects directly to something Demise says in Skyward Sword, his curse. The promise that incarnations of his hatred would pursue the hero and the goddess's bloodline forever. If Malice is the physical manifestation of that curse, then every victory Link has ever achieved across every game was temporary by design. The evil doesn't die, it sheds its skin and starts over, which means the Zelda franchise might not be a story about defeating evil at all. It might be a story about an evil that literally cannot be defeated, dressed up in green tunics and triumphant music to make you think the good guys won. And if that's true, then the reincarnation cycle that drives every single game in this series takes on a much darker meaning. The reincarnation cycle. Every mystery in this franchise traces back to one moment, one speech. Soyi, one dying god who looked at the hero standing over him and didn't beg, didn't bargain, didn't rage. He made a promise. Demise's exact words in Skyward Sword aren't a threat. They're a sentence. Those like you, and those who share the blood of the goddess. I will follow your kind into the future. Not I might return, not my followers will avenge me. He personally guarantees that an incarnation reincarnation of his hatred will pursue Link's bloodline and Zelda's bloodline forever, and then he dies. But the curse doesn't. Here's the thing. Every single game that comes after Skyward Sword is proof that he was telling the truth. The hero reincarnates across the child timeline, the adult timeline, and the downfall timeline with similar appearance, instinctive combat ability, and occasionally fragmented memories of lives they never lived. Old Zelda reincarnates alongside them. Hyrule Historia documents this explicitly across more than 10,000 years of branching history. This isn't fan theory, this is the architectural foundation of the entire franchise. But nobody in the game stops to ask the obvious question. Does the hero actually have a choice? Think about what the cycle really means. Every Link is born into a conflict that was decided before their civilization existed. They're equipped with skills from previous lives they can't remember, drawn toward a sword they've never held but somehow know how to wield, and tasked with defeating an enemy that has never once stayed dead. The hero of time saved 2 timelines and accidentally created a third where he fails. His reward was becoming the hero's shade. Ancheza goes so tormented he couldn't rest until he passed his techniques to the next prisoner in the chain. The ocarina split history into 3 broken branches. The Twilight vanished. The Zonai disappeared. Malice kept spreading. The cycle continued regardless, because the cycle doesn't care about outcomes. It only cares about repetition. And the question Nintendo has never answered is whether any of it can stop. Demise was destroyed in Skyward Sword. His physical form is gone. But the curse survived his death, which means the curse isn't tied to him anymore. It's self-sustaining. Every subsequent game is evidence. Every forest with rules that don't make sense. Every mask with a will of its own. Every ghost who can't find peace. Every civilization that built wonders and then vanished without explanation. They're all downstream of this single moment. The most foundational debate in the entire Zelda community isn't about timelines or power scaling or which game is best. It's about whether the reincarnation cycle exists to prevent an apocalypse or to perpetuate one. Whether the hero is saving the world or just keeping a cursed machine running because nobody knows how to turn it off. The Zelda franchise isn't a mythology about heroes winning. It's a mythology about a curse so ancient and so deeply embedded in reality that winning might be the wrong goal entirely. And after tracing every mystery back to its roots, the most unsettling realization is simple. The curse isn't a flaw in the story. The curse is the story. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the